Don't do that!
Go to hell!
Every time I get my hands on a complicated puzzle box, I still get uncomfortable while opening it. Such has been the impact of growing up on the Hellraiser movies. The Clive Barker novella, The Hellbound Heart, established a lore that was unheard of in the genre, and the movies brought this absolute nightmare to life as we were introduced to the world of the Cenobites and the sinister Hell Priest Pinhead. The first movie crafted a legacy so deep that it spanned across an entire franchise, comic books, and a book anthology, as well as a movie series that overstays its welcome. As with any movie series that overstays its welcome, the later movies were far from impressive, but I never lost interest in the core concept. This is why I was thrilled when it was first announced back in June 2019 that the first Hellraiser TV series would be developed. But it's now been over 7 years, and there's yet to be a concrete announcement on when we can expect this show. I thought this might be a good time to catch you up with all that's happened so far, and with this video, we'll explore the real chances of the show ever being made.
Go home.
The rights were already complicated. The hidden problem behind Hellraiser. The last time we heard from the Hellraiser movie franchise was the 2022 reboot that featured Jamie Clayton as Pinhead. And while it was a film with very mixed reviews, it also highlighted the complications with the rights. The problems began long ago when Clive Barker was in charge of handling things as he adapted his novella into the 1987 Hellraiser movie. He had a tough time financing the film, and he had to sign away the story and character rights to the production company New World Pictures. He later admitted that he never anticipated that the movie would go on to become such a breakout hit, and soon after, the franchise expectedly moved into sequel territory. The rights and distribution kept shifting through corporate deals, and the third film was the first one to be released under the Dimension Films banner. I think it's safe to say that the Hellraiser franchise endured some of the worst times when it was under the stewardship of Bob Weinstein's Dimensions Films. A series of underfinanced sequels were released, including Hellraiser Revelations in 2011 and Hellraiser Judgment, and they hardly did justice to the concept. Also, it's worth noting that Dimension Films was then a part of Miramax, which Disney owned from 1993. And it remained the main home for Hellraiser sequels for a long time. Later, Disney sold Miramax in 2010, and the pre-2005 Dimension Films library, including the early Hellraiser movies, ended up with Paramount via Miramax. As for the post-2005 Dimension titles, they largely went to Lionsgate through various acquisitions. You know it's trouble when intellectual property gets caught up into such ownership complications, and the consequences have been causing all kinds of unexpected delays. I would say that the most significant development in this tussle over the rights was Clive Barker's copyright termination case. You see, under the Copyright Act of 1976, authors can terminate prior grants of copyright roughly 35 years after transfer. And on December 18, 2019, Barker served a statutory termination notice to reclaim his U.S. copyright interests in The Hellbound Heart and the Hellraiser screenplay. He sued for declaratory judgment against Park Avenue Entertainment, who held rights connected to the underlying work in the US by the late 2010s. Barker got this case settled in his favor, and from late 2021 onward, he has control over the US rights to the underlying story and the core characters like Pinhead, the Cenobites, and even the puzzle box. However, the termination applies to US copyright only, and international rights remain governed by other jurisdictions and deals. Also, Clive Barker doesn't automatically own the later sequel scripts or new characters and plot elements. When the 2022 Hulu reboot happened, it was Barker overseeing it, and he was credited as the executive producer. The film was produced with Spyglass Media Group, and even the planned HBO series had announced Barker as an executive producer, which was good news for the fans because it meant that he would have a major creative say. However, the 2019 TV package was independent of the Spyglass movie reboot, even though there was no direct clash between the two. The Hellraiser TV series director David Gordon Green was not particularly opposed to the 2022 movie project. He said, "It's going to be fascinating because it's a different platform, different concept, different creators, but the same property." How HBO enters the labyrinth. The April 2020 deal. On April 27, 2020, it was time for another major development in the much-awaited Hellraiser TV series, and it was HBO who entered the picture. They made a development deal for the series, and even though it was not a formal announcement that HBO had ordered a full season, HBO made a deal to develop a series from the iconic horror franchise with David Gordon Green set to direct the pilot and the other initial episode. It was also announced that this would mark the first appearance of Pinhead on the small screen, and the series would be written by Mark Verheiden and Michael Dougherty. Now, there were some big name drops. Mark Verheiden is credited for his work in Battlestar Galactica, Daredevil, and Heroes. with Michael Dougherty being a veteran of Godzilla King of Monsters and X-Men United. The idea behind this series was to create a continuation and expansion of the well-established Hellraiser lore, and it was never meant to be a remake. All this sounds very exciting, right? Well, it did for a while before the series that was supposed to revive the franchise slipped into development hell. It was a horror dream team, everyone who was involved. We had very good reasons to be excited about this one, and one of the major factors was the dream team that was assembled for the job. You had the writers Mark Verheiden and Michael Dougherty, and even David Gordon Green was the perfect man as the director, with his experience in films like Halloween in 2018 and later, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, and The Exorcist Believer. Mark Verheiden was supposed to serve as a showrunner as well. Also, the team had some promising executive producers, including Clive Barker, David Salzman, Eric Gardner, and many others. If you wanted people who would do justice to the legacy of Hellraiser, this would be the perfect creative team. For me, the presence of Clive Barker among the executive producers was reassuring, because this would mean that his input would be valued, and who better than him to follow up with a TV series that lives up to the brilliance of the original. Why David Gordon Green? Halloween had changed everything. I know many of you are probably wondering what was so special about David Gordon Green that he was chosen to be the director for the pilot and initial episode. I mean, he's good, but weren't there better horror directors around? Well, the answer to this lies in one of his works that got him selected in the first place. We're talking about Halloween from 2018, which was about the perfect CV that he could have chosen as the director for the Hellraiser TV series. He successfully rebooted Halloween for its 40th anniversary, and it was a box office hit as well. The movie proved that he could revive a classic franchise without ignoring the earlier mythology, and also create his own style of storytelling that's not a remake of the original. That's precisely what was needed for a franchise like Hellraiser, because the TV series wasn't supposed to be a blind remake of Clive Barker's first movie, but it was supposed to take the lore seriously. After resurrecting Michael Myers, HBO wanted Green to help resurrect Pinhead, and I think he was a pretty good choice. What was the Hellraiser TV show actually going to be? This is one aspect that has eluded the fans because precious little was revealed about the roadmap of the TV series. We were told about the people involved in the basic theme, but nothing was said about the story that would be followed. The initial details that came up is that the idea was to create an elevated continuation and expansion of the well-established Hellraiser mythology. As I've said before, the series was never meant to be a blind remake. In fact, it was stated that the past mythology would be a given and that the story would be based on that. Another major revelation about the show was the confirmation that Pinhead would be in the mix of things. I mean, it's difficult to imagine Hellraiser without Pinhead. The merciless leader of the Cenobites would be leading the charge, and I think it's safe to assume that the Lament configuration would play a key role as well. I'm guessing that the basic draft of the story would look like someone opening the puzzle box to summon Pinhead, and we get some new characters and a new crisis to start things off. It wouldn't just go on retelling the story of Frank, Julia, and Christy in their tryst with Pinhead, and I love the idea of an original story. The vision was perfect, and as Clive Barker said in a statement, "I'm delighted that the Hellraiser mythology is seeing a new life. It's time the stories went back to their roots. I'm eager to bring a new audience to the most powerful and ancient elements of horror, the darkest evil invading our human lives, and how we must find in ourselves the power to resist it." You'll find a lot of speculations online about the plot, but the truth is that there's been no major official word on the show narrative, and we know nothing about the protagonists or major characters involved, except the confirmation about Pinhead. The original 2019 version may have looked different. This is a subtle change that many of those not following the developments closely may have missed. With the idea of a Hellraiser TV series was first floated in 2019, the vision was slightly different from the one that was picked after the entry of HBO. With the producers Roy Lee and Dan Farah first packaged the project in 2019, the details that emerged talked about using classic mythology to create a modern TV reimagining of the core concept. There were also reports of an anthology format being considered, and by the time HBO announced its involvement, the language had become more specific. For starters, it was clarified that the TV series would be a continuation or expansion of the established lore and not a remake. Secondly, the talks about an anthology format were no longer doing the rounds. To be fair, it is normal for ideas to change when a big production house enters the picture, because with big investments comes bigger visions that are set on making the money back. Also, the fans didn't mind the change at all, because the entry of HBO was supposed to seal the deal about a TV series. Who would have thought that I'd be talking to you about a show 7 years later, like what could have been, with no clue of when or how the show would resume? Then Clive Barker came back. As I've said before in this video, it wasn't just the involvement of HBO, but the comeback of Clive Barker that was the most exciting for the fans. He was not part of the initially announced HBO team, and this changed on October 30th, 2020, when Barker officially joined as an executive producer. This was a very significant development because, as you would know, Barker had little to no involvement in most of the later Hellraiser films. His absence was noticeable as the franchise lost its way, and I don't think many people would speak highly about the films that didn't have his creative inputs. He was thrilled by the opportunity, and I would say that his inclusion has much to do with his victory in the intellectual property rights case that I spoke about earlier. His involvement made things a lot less complicated for HBO, and not to mention, his inputs were invaluable. Immediately after his inclusion in the project, he made it clear that the show was more than merely recycling the iconography of Pinhead, and given how little he was involved in the later Hellraiser films, I would say this is a significant change. So, was HBO's Hellraiser actually canceled? Okay, so you've heard enough about the drama, and now it's time for the big question. Is the show actually canceled, or is it just delayed? Well, the answer is positive for the fans and also a bit disappointing. As of this date, there is no public announcement on a major trade report that formally cancels the Hellraiser TV series. In fact, the last update that we received was back in 2021 when Green was speaking to EW during the promotional tour of Halloween Kills. Back then, he said, "We've got it over at HBO. That's not in script form yet, but it's being developed." He also expressed his excitement about the latest movie developments, and he was on board with the idea that the same concept was being explored for a film as well as a TV series. Even if you check out Clive Barker's official website, you'll see this project under the current TV projects page, but this shouldn't be seen as proof that there's any active development. I understand that delays are quite normal in the industry, but when a project is stuck without any noticeable development for over 5 years, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence about its future. It might not be officially canceled, but it might still be silently dying a slow death as the delay continues to extend. Did the Hulu movie kill HBO's Hellraiser? First of all, you need to understand that the two projects are completely different and not related at all. The Hulu film moved rapidly through production after it was announced, and the HBO project didn't even have a complete script until late 2021. Like I said before in this video, Barker was excited to see the movie and didn't see this as negatively impacting their announced TV series. There were rumors about legal battles between the two sides, but none of that has ever been confirmed. Hellraiser 2022 by David Bruckner marked the 11th film in the franchise, and Jamie Clayton as Pinhead was one of the highlights of the film. It received mixed reviews, but it was still one of the most watched movies in the US during its release week, and I don't think the performance was bad enough to send warning signs to HBO for their project. But at the same time, the film wasn't exactly a breakout hit either, and maybe the executives at HBO were hoping for an overwhelming response to go ahead with their TV series during a fan frenzy. David Gordon Green moved on, and Michael Dougherty had another Clive Barker TV project. Now, this is a reason that might have indirectly led to delays behind the TV series. David Gordon Green got very busy ever since the announcement, and he got some very exciting opportunities. He directed Halloween Kills in 2021, followed by Halloween Ends in 2022, and he was in talks for The Exorcist Believer in 2023. Then he directed Nutcrackers in 2024. Later, he quit the Exorcist project, but he kept busy with the 4th season of the HBO comedy series The Righteous Gemstones. His other TV projects as of 2026 include Maximum Pleasure Guarantee, and it was reported that he had committed to the Miramax thriller Supermax. Clearly, his career has not looked back, and a Hellraiser TV series is not a determining factor for him anymore. He's moved forward, even though the show hasn't, and I hope this changes in the near future, but at this point, I'm probably just being optimistic. Meanwhile, as Green remained busy with multiple projects, Michael Dougherty wasn't sitting idle either. It's a remarkable coincidence that he was involved with a planned Nightbreed TV adaptation, and this too happens to be a Clive Barker property. In fact, Barker has publicly discussed Dougherty working on the project and praised him as a great collaborator. However, this also means that Dougherty was potentially working within 2 separate Barker universes around the same time period, and maybe it was a conscious decision to push back Hellraiser. Also, it's worth noting that the Nightbreed TV series has a troubled history, and as luck would have it, even this one seems to have stalled. Could HBO's Hellraiser still come back? Like I said before, the project's not been officially canceled, and thus technically it can always come back. From what I've seen with several such projects, all it takes is a solid initiative and the right people roped in, and things move suddenly after remaining stagnant for years. The same has happened with the He-Man live-action film in recent times, and there are far too many examples. Hellraiser's TV series can always be revived with new writers and directors. I mean, it would be a bit too much to expect the same people will still be on board, given that some of them have become rather busy of late. As of now, there's no public evidence that the cameras are preparing to roll, and incomplete scripts and undone casting doesn't paint a very bright picture. I guess if the series is ever revived, it'll need some fresh news from HBO, the rights holders, Clive Barker, or at least the creative team, before we can call this an active project. So yes, it can theoretically come back, but the real scenario seems bleak. In short, the future of the Hellraiser TV series doesn't look very promising. I mean, the show hasn't been officially canceled, but I can't say that it's meaningfully alive. It's been a very long time since the announcement, and even if they revisit the project to start things off, there's a good chance that you'll see new people and new ideas involved. Also, the truth is that the latest Hellraiser reboot film didn't exactly set the box office on fire. and the creators of the TV show might be hesitant to go ahead with a pre-approved plan. On the upside, 2026 has been a great year for horror, and I hope that this motivates them enough to get back on board and deliver on the promised Hellraiser series. All I can say is that if done right, it can be a horror series for the next decade. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the chances of the Hellraiser TV series ever being made. And also, tell me how you would like the story to move forward. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, and make sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss any more of our marvelous videos. Stay safe, and as always, stay marvelous.